IVM.
Hi and welcome to Know Your Kanoon. This is Amber from Corpus Legal. Continuing our journey of advent of the legislation of Section 498A. We'll talk about today Section 304B, which talks about dowry death, and 306, which was introduced, which is about abetment to suicide, which form core parts of 498A as well. Just to give our listeners the distinction between what, both the sections are and what 498A is, I'll just take you through the legislation in layman's language. So Section 304B of the Indian Penal Code talks about, the presumption and the issue of dowry death. The section reads, where the death of a woman is caused by any burns or bodily injury or occurs otherwise than under normal circumstances within 7 years of her marriage. So the 7-year itch, as they say, the 7 years of marriage, it has to be shown that soon before her death, she was subjected to cruelty or harassment by her husband or any relative of her husband or in connection with any of these individuals, and the demand has to be for dowry. Then only this section can be invoked. Now, what I'd like to bring to your notice is that it is again only talking about dowry here, whereas if you see 498A, when I come to the whole description subsequently in our episodes, we'll cover a wider ambit of what, cruelty is to a woman, whether it is mental or physical. Here it is only specific to dowry. So any individual who goes through a demand of dowry from her in-laws can invoke this section. But where she's forced to do something and there is constant harassment and, there are circumstances which are causing her to be in a miserable situation, can go to 498A. So there's a small line of difference. This section can only be, invoked in case of being subjected to dowry. Now, another point to be seen in this section is that, you can be harassed or physically injured or harmed for the skin, the color of your skin, for how you look, how you appear. Will that cause you to be involved in cruelty at all or not? Also, since all of us are from different, religious backgrounds and beliefs, etc., people subjugate to that also, like intercaste marriage is happening all the time, and then a woman might have to go through some different scornful events as well. Well, what has to be seen here is 304B will only and only be invoked. That's the limitation of the section in case of dowry demand, nothing else. For other recourses, the women folk have to look forward to 498A to get that relief. So this was analyzed by the courts over a period of time that, this section is also not limiting because the number of petitions being filed was high in the courts. So they realized that this particular section is also not curbing what their intent was behind it, and they enacted 498A subsequently. Coming to the next section of Section 306B, which is abetment of suicide. Now, why I brought this into picture is because, there are situations of dowry demand, etc., where the women commit suicide. And the individuals are again indicted under 306 or maybe 304 or maybe 498A, as I'm mentioning. What has to be seen here is that, 306 is only about assisting in suicide. It is not compelling an individual to do something which has led to, her some kind of demand, etc. It could be as simple as me sitting here and somebody committing suicide and I offer a bottle of chloroform to help the individual commit suicide. That's a criminal activity. It's abetment of suicide. There is no clear intent on my part that that individual should commit a suicide. There is no active mens rea on my part. I might also be the individual who's sitting outside and supplied somebody with some particular object to help that individual commit suicide. I could be that guy. That is abetment. I need not be actively involved in it. So women need to realize that, where they're approaching this section and how they're approaching this section. You can be incriminated under Section 304B for demand of dowry, and you as well can also be incriminated under 498A. They are not mutually inclusive. They are exclusive sections. There is a constructive interpretation for both which can be there. There are contrasting views, of course, by the court. But by constructive interpretation, I mean that both, you can be convicted in both. So if somebody is going through a situation where there is a demand for dowry and there is a particular situation where she's subjected to cruelty also, they can approach both the sections and get the recourse done. Bringing again to the notice of listeners, I like to bring out something very interesting. There is a simple case study which came into picture, during one course of our profession, that a lady was traveling with her husband and the in-laws started talking about the color of her skin. And they started inciting her on that and saying that, people from your side of the country are like that, and because of which we were not able to get the amount of money we should be getting. And they laid back about it. There was no further recourse to it. They did not go on harping about it. They just cited this couple of times. And it happened, let's say 3 to 4 times in the course of journey. Whereas the woman, after getting down from the car, committed suicide. And the suicide was so impertinent that she stabbed herself. And in that very fit of the moment, I mean, it was very amazing that she wrote also a note in the car saying that, I am doing this because the following individuals have commented on the color of my skin. Now, the court decided that where to plant the section because, a literal interpretation has to be there. So the respective relatives of the deceased went and approached the court, and it was fairly let out that this was a dowry death, if they would want to justify it into that sense, because none of the individuals were subjecting her to cruelty. I mean, they had minced words that, commenting on the color of the skin. How is cruelty related to that? It was one odd instance. I mean, legislative interpretations are different. And they were also framed under Section 306B, which is abetment of suicide, that, why was there a knife in the car, etc. What I'm trying to bring out here is that the interpretation is everything. The sections are very limiting, and the judiciary could not again stop. I mean, this could be harassment for somebody. Like the color of the skin being commented again and again could be harassment for me. It might not be harassment for you. So what has to be thought of is what is the reasonable logical thinking behind the section. So the court said nothing doing. These sections are not stopping what we are intending. Hence 498A was made more powerful. Also, when I talk about the limitation of the, Section 304B or 306, what I'm trying to say is that, the intent of the legislation, if you see here, is that only till 7 years of the marriage of the respective individual can this section be invoked. I mean, like, what after that? I'm not saying that judicial interpretation or judicial analysis of marriage is not correct. I mean, they have had a vision, and that is why the law came into picture. I mean, it was a deterrent, but did it stop everything? No. So what has to be seen, 498A gives you that reprieve and reprisal from the 7 years limitation as well. If it is beyond 7 years, the humiliation, 498A gives you that recourse. We'll be covering 498A in detail now in our third leg, or the final leg of what 498A actually is, where we'll be splitting up the section into parts and taking on to practical examples and interpretations of what it is. Thank you for listening to Know Your Kanoon. For more queries and questions, please contact me at contact@corpuslegal.in. Catch Know Your Kanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
Did you know that Parsis in Mumbai, instead of being left at the Tower of Silence after they die, are now cremated? And why? Because a cow fell sick in the early 1990s. Did you know that the smog in Delhi is caused by something that farmers in Punjab do and that there's no way to stop them? Did you know that there wasn't one gas tragedy in Bhopal, but 3? One of them was seen, but 2 were unseen. Did you know that many well-intentioned government policies hurt the people they're supposed to help? Why was demonetization a bad idea? How should GST have been implemented? Why are all our politicians so corrupt when not all of them are bad people? I'm Amit Verma, and in my weekly podcast, The Seen and the Unseen, I take a shot at answering all these questions and many more. I aim to go beyond the seen and show you the unseen effects of public policy and private action. I speak to experts on economics, political philosophy, cognitive neuroscience, and constitutional law so that the insights can blow not only my mind, but also yours. The Seen and the Unseen releases every Monday. So do check out the archives and follow the show at seenunseen.in. You can also subscribe to The Seen and the Unseen on whatever podcast app you happen to prefer.
Look! Up in the internet! It's a meme! No! It's a cat video! No! It's the Geek Fruit Podcast!
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, The Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.